Hello, BookTube. This is the My Favorite Writers tag. It was created by Steve Donahue. If I understand this right, it's an adaptation of something Steve saw on the What Page Are You On channel. So I will link that. And I was also tagged, I was tagged by Steve, and I was tagged by Jason Harrigan, a newer channel that is absolutely fantastic. I'm having a great time talking back and forth with him. From Western Ireland. He's got a great book collection, and he's a hoot. So I recommend going over there, and obviously to Steve's channel, and to What Page Are You On? So it's an interesting tag, but it's a little tough. You'll notice I'm in a different spot. I actually had to bring out a chair so that I can use this table over here to hold the books. And it's a simple tag in a way, but it's very complicated to actually sit down and make the choices. So you start off with 6 authors who are not quite, and that's my favorite writers. 4 authors that are maybe, and then you finish it up with 5 who are. Now, this doesn't mean you only have 5 authors who you are your favorites. It just means you're picking 5 for this. And it was a bear. And any one of these writers you're going to see, if they came out with something, those of them that are still alive, I would be excited. So I'm going to get right into it and see if we can maneuver through these piles of books. So I'm going to start off here, the 6 who are not quite, and they're all wonderful. So the first here is a biographer, and in this case I have the Mozart volume because I didn't want to grab everything else. This is Maynard Solomon. I have lots of biographies of Mozart, and some of them are quite good. This one was outstanding. When did this come out? This came out from Harper's and Collins in 1995. A comprehensive life of Mozart. Like I said, he's done Beethoven, and he was quite a scholar. These books actually sold quite well when they came out, so probably quite a few of you will remember them. The next one, I can't believe I'm putting them in the not quite category. It's just the nature of the tag, okay? And that's Robert Frost. This is an excellent biography of him by Jay Perini. And this here is a collection of his poetry, which I absolutely love. He was a California-born, New England roots, and ended up living in New England and England. This is an older volume. His stuff has always been among my favorite poetry. Yeats would be, and Tennyson and Frost. There'd be quite a few. This Jay Perini Life of Robert Frost is wonderful. This one came out in 1999. Frost, as many of you will know, had a house here in Vermont. He had one in New Hampshire. He lived over in England for a while. There's a big connection with Dartmouth University, which was right up the road. So this is his, let me see here. This is his home in Ripton, Vermont. There he is with some students. So yeah, there was an old biography set, I can't remember the author anymore, who did sort of a hatchet job on Frost. I like Perini. There's been newer stuff that's better about Frost in the last 10, 15 years. Older than that, you got to be a little careful, I think. So that's 2 of the 6. And then the next one, another one I love. I hated having them. Not quite, right? And the reason not quite on this one, because not every book he wrote, I'm not sure that's a fair criterion. I guess it is. Not everything he wrote was great for me. But when he was on, he was really on. And that's Nikos Kazantzakis. My favorite novel of his is this one, Freedom or Death. Absolutely wonderful. And then his odd autobiography, Report to Greco. So it's a strange literary hybrid, but wonderful read. So the Report to Greco, my copy was Simon & Schuster, translated from the Greek by P.A. Bien, and this one is a second printing from 1965. What a book. But this one here, Freedom or Death, the fiction, is a novel on a heroic scale about the rebellion of the Greek Christians on the island of Crete against their Turkish conquerors. And it's just fantastic. Fantastic book. If you like historical fiction with some real grit. And then this next one too. Boy, I love what this author does. It's not for everybody, but I love it. And this is Roberto Colasso. I just happen to, I have a shelf full of his stuff. I don't have everything, but I have a shelf full of it. And this is The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony, which is the first one of his. It was quite a bestseller, and that's how I found out about him. It was quite an international event when this book came out. It really took off. So this came out in 1993. Let's see. The eternal question that man has always asked of his universe also forms the opening words of this book. In answer, and in the voice of a born storyteller, all erudition, all interpretation is hidden in the folds of his dazzling narrative. Colasso leads us through the maze, back to the time when the gods were not yet born from the original coupling of Uranus and Ge, Mother Earth. Then and forward again all the way to the death of Odysseus. Colasso's an Italian writer. He's a head of Delphi editions in Milan, and here's a picture of him. Absolutely fascinating fellow. But maybe not to everybody's taste, but I like what he does. And this other one, how is this not quite? Boy. It's Samuel Eliot Morison. And this one is The Two Ocean War, A Short History of the United States Navy in the Second World War. Absolutely wonderful abridgment of his multi-volume work on the United States Navy in the Second World War. He served, he was a historian, but he was commissioned an officer and served during the war so he could write this. And he's written many books. I absolutely love his writing. He wrote a biography called OBrien about Perry opening up Japan. He wrote Samuel Champlain biography, John Paul Jones. He did a 2-volume set that's absolutely amazing on the exploration of North and South America, one volume the other. His work on Christopher Columbus is monumental and just totally readable. And it goes on and on and on. So, yeah. Samuel Eliot Morison. And then my favorite book when I was a little fella, still one of my favorites. I got this little teeny edition, but I've always loved this book. And that's Robert Louis Stevenson. This is Kidnapped with illustrations by A.M. Trotter. This came out from Thomas Nelson's and Son in London. Let's see if I can get a picture here. Oh, there's a little map. Love the story. Also, for Robert Louis Stevenson, of course, I used to have this beautiful little set of little red leather volumes that's all gone now. His travel writing, his essays, Treasure Island, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, hard to go wrong with Robert Louis Stevenson. Then the next part of this tag, which is interesting, so he had 6. authors, and now we're going to 4 authors that maybe are your favorite authors. And I don't know. This is tough. So here, let me grab them over here. So the first would have, through much of my life, been my favorite author, and still ranks right up there. It's just a matter of having to slot everybody where they go. And this is good. It's a good exercise. You change, your reading changes throughout life. So for me, it would be Frank Herbert. Here's an old paperback of Dune. I've got pretty old copies of all of his books upstairs, or all of his Dune books anyway. And yeah, when I was a teenager, I ran into this book. Actually, a pretty young teenager. Ran into this book. And the same year that I ran into, I believe, The Lord of the Rings, which, you know, it was a magical year for reading for me. They were both sitting there at a friend's house. And, yeah, Paul Atreides, son of Duke Leto Atreides. There's been a Dune Tube thing going on that I was part of the first book. And I highly recommend it. Religion, political intrigue, ecological intrigue, I guess you could call it that. Dynastic stuff, all very interesting. Absolutely love Dune. And then the other one I mentioned, of course, on this list of 4 would have to be J.R.R. Tolkien. I grabbed a copy of the Return of the King. This is just an old paperback I had. The 3rd volume in that book that's not really a trilogy. It was actually meant to be published as 1 volume, but it was published as a trilogy. So you know, have Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and then The Return of the King. This is what the inside of this one looks like. And hobbits and dwarves and dragons and men and Treebeard. And yeah, then it goes on and on. It's an entire world, just like Dune. Dune is an imagined, a world-building construct that's amazing, as is this. This is a little more traditional in the sense that it's based on northern myths, Norse, Scandinavian, British, all amalgam of these Germanic. He's taken that world that he loved and basically wrote an mythology for the British Isles. So quite good. And so then we move on. Another wonderful writer, but I'm going to show you 2 volumes that show the difference in, I think, the quality. The only reason, he's just fantastic, or was. But there is a difference in quality between these 2 books, I think. This is Robert Hughes. He was famous for his book about Australia. And he was Australian, although he lived and worked in the United States. He wrote a famous book called The Fatal Shore. I didn't bring that one. Most people have seen it. But the 2 books I wanted to show side by side here, if I get glare off one and then it goes on the other one. Barcelona and then Rome. They're like city biographies. Barcelona was magnificent. Absolutely amazing book. Rome, good, even excellent, but not quite to the same standard, in my opinion. So that, take that as you will. You can't go wrong reading either one of them. But this one here is a magnificent book about a magnificent city. He's an art historian and art critic. So you'll see, and he tells it the way he sees it. He's pretty famous for that. This came out 1992, and it is of its kind of book one of the best I've ever read. Just a magnificent history from the beginning to the modern era of one city, and it's just fantastic. His art criticism essays, I think I've got a volume of his called Nothing If Not Critical or something close to that. That's just fantastic. But boy, he doesn't like everything, okay? So he's worth getting to know. And then this last one, boy, a couple years ago, would have been in the next set. But yeah, this is a book I love, again by an author that I don't love everything. And it's an author in translation, as a few of these were, like Colosso. This is Gunter Grass, and this is The Tin Drum, a book I absolutely loved. I've read, and then when's this one came out? He won the Nobel Prize, translated from the German by Ralph Mannheim. It's Pantheon Books from, this is 99th printing. It came out in 1961. So, yeah, it was an event, a literary event when it came out, and it was one for quite a long time. So he published it in 1959 in German. It's a wonderful novel, but didn't quite get to where we wanted to be. Now these next ones I'm going to have to actually lean over, see if I can throw this thing on over here. I'm going to have to do these in order. This time it's in order. I got to see if I can do this. Wow, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to maneuver them because some of them are big, and I grabbed more than one example of several of these because I wanted you to get this is the 5 that made it. This is the 5 that are my favorite authors. So when I was watching Jason's, I joke him that I bet the farm, this little old farmhouse in Vermont. I said, I bet the farm because I knew your answer. I'm not going to tell you what his answer was, but I knew. I sat there, my wife and I were watching him. We really enjoy watching him. And I go, I know what it is. I know what it is. I wouldn't shut up. And she said, what is it? And I told her, and I was wrong. So if I had bet the farm, I'd be sleeping out in my truck right now. But I didn't really. So, yeah, go watch that video. I picked it wrong. Some of you might know what I picked, but you can go check it out. So I'm going to start here with an author that is absolutely central to the cultural history of the 20th century. He was in the mix. He was always there. He was a conductor, a musician, a writer, magnificent writer. And he was also the secretary for Igor Stravinsky. And his name's Robert Kraft, an immensely capable, talented person. And he was at the center of culture, world music culture, and literary, for decades. Not everybody liked him because he had access and because he got that access through Stravinsky, but I don't buy that reason not to like him. And I don't think he's a source for the artistic history of the West in the 20th century. So if you're into that sort of thing. So here is a one-volume edition of his Stravinsky volumes. He wrote with Stravinsky and he wrote on his own also. And this one is sort of handy if you were going to get an introduction, and that is Memories and Commentaries, Igor Stravinsky and Robert Kraft. If you find any of the individual volumes, you can read them out of order. You can just dip in and see people and hear about people that you've heard about your whole life. So this was published by who? This was Faber and Faber. So here we have an image of Stravinsky in St. Petersburg and then a few others. Got him here with Diaghilev, Ravel. Yeah, it's just going to be, here's Picasso, and Stravinsky's right there. So Here's one of the volumes in that set, which is Retrospectives and Conclusions, Igor Stravinsky and Robert Kraft. And the Stravinskys, Vera and Igor, really, really depended on and appreciated Robert Kraft. Let's see here. This is... so the other books by them were Themes and Episodes, Dialogues in a Diary, Expositions and Developments, Memories and Commentaries, and Conversations. So this came out in 1969. It's one of the later ones. So it's to Christopher Isherwood. Yeah, it's just... I read this stuff all day, and to read it all, you would have to read it all day. Here is Memoirs of Stravinsky, Schoenberg, and Other Cultural Figures by Robert Kraft. This is published by Naxos Books, which is an arm of Naxos Music. And this is Down a Path of Wonder. Beautiful volume. Hopefully you'd be able to still find this. It would be a shame if you couldn't. It has Robert Kraft, his music on Naxos listed here. So his discography includes Stravinsky, Schoenberg, and Weber. Does have photos in this one also. I mean, they were heavily photographed folks. There's Igor and Vera. Let's see here. Aldous Huxley. There. And then, yeah, one more here is his memoirs, An Improbable Life. Again, a magnificent book. Great read. This was University Press. This was Vanderbilt. And this came out in 2002. He also did some travel writing. He just died a few years ago. There he is as a little fella. From New York. Here he is in Stravinsky apartment on Fifth Avenue in New York. And visiting China over here. So, great character to get acquainted with. So then, I'm going to go. So that was the first of the five. This is running long, I apologize, but I'm having sort of fun. And I had to dig all these books out, so I need to take some time. The next one is writer of historical fiction, and a New Englander like myself, and I've always loved his books. I don't understand why they're not in Library of America. Maybe they will be. And that's Kenneth Roberts. Here's Rabble in Arms. So he wrote a lot about the colonial period and the Revolutionary period. Northwest Passage, Oliver Wiswell, Lydia Bailey. I've got a few things here. He was also, he wrote a book here, I Wanted to Write, which is a little harder to find. This is an old beat-up copy. This has the habitat of the American Expeditionary Force, Siberia, 1918 to 1919, which is an interesting story and included in here as well as how he became a writer. So a bit of nonfiction there. Here is an old copy of something called the Kenneth Roberts Reader. So is an article, Lore of the Great North Woods, The Glories of War, All Kinds Make an Army, Country Life in Italy, A Little Home in the Country. This one came out, it has an introduction by Ben Ames Williams, another name that's forgotten probably. This came out in, this is 1945. He's very popular and prominent writer at that time. Here's, he wrote a book called Arundel, and it's about the March to Quebec by Benedict Arnold. So to research this, he put together this volume because he's researched all the diaries of that expedition, or is what he could find. So here's the route going up through Maine into Canada to Quebec. It's a horrific march. So March to Quebec, journals of the members of Arnold's expedition compiled and annotated by Kenneth Roberts during the writing of Arundel. This came out in 1938. Benedict Arnold, as many of you will know, betrayed the young country, but he was one, and this is no excuse, he was one of its greatest generals. He had problems with the Congress, which a lot of folks did in his position, but eventually it was just too much for him. He was very proud and willful, but as a battlefield commander, there was few in the revolutionary armies of what would become the United States who could equal him. Amazing, amazing general. But he squandered that. So the next one here may surprise a few of you in this position because we're sort of going in order. So Kraft, Kenneth Roberts. But then I'm going to go with Master and Commander. I'm going with Patrick O'Brien. you can see, I guess you can't see them all. Keeps going that way. I've got them all in these beautiful, his Aubrey Maturin novels. I have them all in these beautiful Folio Society editions just because when it came out, he was a project I wanted to embark on. Really strange fella. There's been a couple biographies of him. One by a guy named King. A few others. He was a bit of a recluse. He translated literature from the French into English. He was from England. He lived in France and passed himself off as an Irishman. But the fame of these books has grown unbelievably since the later part of his life up to the present day. He's been dead for a while. And so some of that started coming out. He had a very odd life. His biography is very fascinating. Fascinating character, but the books are magnificent. This one is Master and Commander. Like I say, really nice folios here if you like that. Here's the end papers. I have done a few videos on these, the first few. So this has an introduction by Max Hastings, London Folio Society, 2008. The thing about the Folio Society, they have a good research department who does these things. There are also guides that will help you with the geography of the stories and with the terminology and all that. If you need that, there's like a dictionary of terms used in this. You can read it without it. It is sort of fun to dig down into it. He's very much of the time period he's writing about. I mean, not personally, but he's researched it so much that it's fascinating. The next two, so position 1 and 2, I really struggled with. But I'm going to, in the second spot, have Ursula K. Le Guin, The Books of Earthsea, the complete illustrated edition, which is just this volume, just won a Hugo Award for art at the World Science Fiction Convention in Dublin. This is all of her Earthsea books, which I read as a young fella. and very much loved. This is a magnificent volume. She approved the art for this, and I will tell you who it is as soon as I get a couple more images here. Some of these images are in color, some are not. The word for world is forest, dispossessed. The number of her volumes, she's actually, in her own lifetime, was one of the ones who made it, is in the Library of America volumes. You can get vast quantities of her writing that way, and yeah, she's just, the older I get, the more I read, the more I appreciate her when I go back to her writing. She was this daughter of a famous anthropologist, Alfred Kroeber. That's the K in Ursula K. Le Guin, Kroeber. She has a way of looking at the world and writing that I just find to be just wonderful. It's fun to read. I feel her voice, there's something about her voice that I really enjoy. And so, drum roll, the number one on the list, my favorite, has held that position for many, many years. You'll notice that some things drop in and out. I still may think they're magnificent, but having to choose here, that's what this tag's all about. Wow. So my favorite is going to be Hermann Hesse. One novel in particular would be Narcissus and Goldman, which may be my favorite book. I just love this story. Let's see here. This is Farrar, Straus and Giroux, New York, from 1968. Translated by Ursula Molinaro, or Ursula, I'm not sure how you say that. It's a great book. Thomas Mann called Narcissus and Goldman a poetic novel unique in its fascination. In a medieval setting, Narcissus and Goldman tells the story of two men whose characters are diametrically opposite. Goldman, a student at the Marylebone cloister, is impressed by the character of brother Narcissus and confides that he too wishes to become a monk. To his surprise, Narcissus advises him that he is wholly unsuited for the monastic life and will never be able to work out his future until he recaptures his childhood. So you have an administrative temperament and a artistic temperament, and it's a wonderful way to explore it. I love the opening of it. Let's see, I'll get it right here. Outside the entrance of the Marylebone cloister, whose rounded arch rested on slim double columns, a chestnut tree stood close to the road. It was a sweet chestnut, with a sturdy trunk and a full round crown that swayed gently in the wind, brought from Italy many years earlier by a monk who had made a pilgrimage to Rome. And I just love this book. Another one of his I really like is Magister Ludi, the glass bead game. Yeah, you can tell mine get a little beat up here. Probably should fix that. This is, let's see, 1969. And it's about the glass bead game. An intellectual game that makes connections through various parts of human thought. And so it's a very different novel, but one that stays with you once you read it. So, yeah. Hermann Hesse, Ursula K. Le Guin, Patrick O'Brien, Robert Kraft, Kenneth Roberts. So they are the ones who ended up on the list. It's going to take me a half hour to put all these books away. But it's a fun tag. I thank you to Steve and to Jason. So I suppose I should tag some folks. I don't know who's done it, so I probably should have looked. Gonna say Paperback Junkie, Earnestly Eston, Biblioatlas, Totally Pretentious, Alan Morton, he may have been tagged already. Run Right Reads, and My Reading Life, Mel's Bookland Adventures. I'm just throwing them out here. Well, if you don't do tags, don't worry about it. But and if you do, this is a good one. It takes a little bit of work, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. And this was a long video, 35 minutes, but thank you, BookTube.